Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all are here. It is the day after we expressed some gratitude, and I hope that all of you had many blessings and much peace. So many of my friends, I don't know if it is part of the fact that I'm getting older, but have experienced great loss this year. And because of that great loss, I know that the holidays are going to be different. But today, I think it's interesting that before I talk about the way we express ourselves around violent crime, I think it's interesting how narratives are shaped and formed. I was looking at one of the news stations that I love to watch, and they were talking about the shooting at Club Q, and the heading said that the father of the shooter was a MMA fighter and a porn star. So in one fell swoop, in one title, what they managed to do was to distance themselves from the fact that one of the main things he doubled down on was that he was a conservative Republican. And I just really hope that when we consider how we talk about, demonize, and separate ourselves from the LGBTQ community, that those little small things we say, whether you say them publicly or privately, baby, are the things that cause our children, our young people, people who are hurting, to go out and feel like they have to annihilate people who have never done anything wrong to them. But today, I want to talk about how the narrative around crime is shared. There are 2 million people in the Kansas City metro area. And so far in 2022, there have been 227 homicides in the KC metro area. And just so you know, that there are 7 counties that make up the KC metro area, and they span Missouri and Kansas. But I want to talk about the number of people in Kansas City exactly. And in Kansas City, there's a little over 500,000 people in Kansas City, 508,000 or so. And in that 508,000 or so, 136,000 of us are Black. And I remember when I went to North Carolina A&T and I said that I was from Missouri, people were like, "They're Black people, out there." But in Kansas City, which is, I wouldn't call us a major metropolis. We are a metropolis, but I don't know if I, compare us to the likes of New York and LA and Chicago and Houston and such. But there are 136,000 Black people in this town. And um, so far this year, we have lost 178 of our citizens to homicide. And that 178, those people, each of them have families who are grieving their loss. On this particular Thanksgiving, it's their first one without their loved one. For some of them, they didn't have families at all. But what I think is interesting, and I think is important, hey, Kevin, is important for us to be able to look at, um, is that when we consider 178 divided by 136,000 Black people, that's 0.13% of Black people in Kansas City have been murdered. Now, I care about each of those 178, and I'm in no way trying to diminish them. What I am saying is that 135,000 plus of us have never fired a weapon. We have never shot a person. So to suggest that whenever there's something that is negative that's going on that impacts Black people, to suggest that, oh, what about Black on Black crime? I'm not even going to talk about the issues with the term right now. I got an issue with the numbers. Black people are not killing other Black people. There are 178 homicides in Kansas City, and there are 136,000 Black people who live here. Many of us don't know anyone who's been murdered. Now, that does not happen to be me, but many of us don't even know a single person who's been murdered in our entire time on the planet. Don't know anybody. And so when the narrative gets pushed that Black people are killing other Black people, my question to you is, how are you killing Black people with your words? It's the equivalent of taking a news article title and suggesting that a homophobic, hate-filled, conservative Republican person said the things that caused his child to go and kill who he believed to be LGBTQ people who have never done anything to him ever. And when you say things like Black on Black crime, who are you talking about really? Because you're not talking about in general just Black people. You're not even talking about in general just poor Black people. You're not talking about uneducated Black people. Who you are talking about by and large are people who we have tried to kill them in childbirth. If we did not manage to do that, we refused to provide food when we knew they were hungry. If we didn't manage to kill them in that way, we decided that we weren't going to provide mental health services if by chance that's something that they need. How dare you demonstrate that you have feelings and show those feelings? What? We've got nothing for you. Then don't talk about when we send our babies into these schools where they don't have a sense of belonging and then get left out and left behind and pushed out. Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about even my son at 11 years old running around and jumping while he's in Zona Rosa and somebody's grabbing their purse. We don't even want to talk about the way that we adultify our children and then are surprised this whole system is violent against Black men. And then you want to say, oh, I'm so shocked. And I think it's fascinating. How do you engineer empathy into the heart of anybody if you won't even acknowledge what is happening here? This entire narrative would not even bother me so much if it was just white people sharing it. But I sat in a room full of Black people last Saturday, and we were talking about the Black women who were missing. And there were people who represent their institutions that have not always been friendly towards Black people. Instead of, in their very first answer, instead of talking about what we can do to recognize when trafficking is happening in our communities, what we can do to support our missing family members, the simple things we can do to be safer when we are together, instead of talking about any of those things, do you want to know what came up? Well, there have been 100 last Saturday. There have been 174 murders this year, and 80% of those are Black men shooting Black men. You know what? Your numbers are accurate. They're right. But you tell me how effective that is helping us find Black girls. You tell me how effective that is at making sure that we have provided affordable housing and that is accessible. You tell me how effective that is when you talk about whether or not we have education that is attainable and creates a sense of belonging. You know, people want to talk about this 178, but what do you do when you killing Black people every single day with your words and deeds? But I can't see your hands. And it happens more literally in the healthcare profession. Look at any stat related to any disease and how it impacts Black people. Look at any stat related to malpractice and how it impacts Black people. We are always at the bottom. Ain't nobody calling them healthcare professionals on Black crime, are we? When you agree to have transportation situations in which you know all of the taxes that are being spent are going to help mostly white people and not any black people. You tell me how that's an empathetic approach to policy. When I can't get to work, I'm going to lose my job. When I lose my job, I'm going to lose my house. When I lose my house, I'm going to be living on the street, and that is dangerous. You tell me how that is not politicians against black people and called crime. Tell me how. When you stand in your pulpit and you see all of the egregious systematic things that are set against your people, and you spew from your lips, well, we got to look at how we treat each other. And you pull, listen, I know folks think they know who I'm talking about when I talk about preachers who bring police officers in the pulpit. You don't know, because it happens across racial lines. And I have no issue with the police. I double down every time I talk about this. If it were not for police, I don't know that we would have safe communities. But what I'll say to this is, who's policing the police? When you can stand outside and listen to person after person after person talk about what Roger Golubsky did to them, raping them, and people knew about it, prosecutors, other detectives and officers, for 40 years. And then when we talk about making his all of the police records digitized so we can see who might be sitting in jail, because even after he was raping women, what he would do is attack their families. And when we talk about digitizing those records so we can make sure we release people from prison who are wrongfully imprisoned, what does the headline say? It's going to cost $2 million to digitize those records. Exactly $1 for every Kansas Citian who lives in the Kansas City metro area. $1. One time charge. And I would ask you, if Golubsky had made sure that you were in jail for a crime for which you did not commit, would you care about what it costs? Who's policing the police? So when I look at a police officer whose face looks like mine, who is a part of organizations that I am also a part of, suggest that black on black crime is the issue, child, my heart was so hurt I almost felt it fall out of my chest. We need a moral defibrillation in this country. The Reverend Dr. William Barber has been saying it for years. And it is the subtlety, it is the knife of the tongue that kills. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.